librarian at Maine, I told this story to tours of students coming to the library, many for the first time to learn to do research. This reading is a part of Chapter 4 from the autobiography of Andrew Carnegie, written after his retirement from active business, as his wife Louise called in her introduction. Chapter 4, Colonel Anderson and the Books. With all their pleasures, the messenger boys were hard worked. Every evening they were required to be on duty until the office closed, and on these nights it was seldom that I reached home before 11 o'clock. On the alternating nights we were relieved at 6. This did not leave much time for self-improvement, nor did the wants of family leave any money to spend on books. There came, however, a blessing to me from above, a means by which the treasures of literature were unfolded to me. Colonel James Anderson, I bless his name as I write, announced that he would open his library of 400 volumes to boys so that any young man could take out each Saturday afternoon a book which could be exchanged for another the succeeding Saturday afternoon. My friend Thomas Miller reminded me recently that Colonel Anderson's books were open only to working boys, and the question arose as to whether messenger boys, clerks, and others who did not work with their hands were entitled to books. My first communication to the press was a note written to the Pittsburgh Dispatch, urging that we should not be excluded, that although we did not now work with our hands, some of us had done so, and we were really working boys. Dear Colonel Anderson promptly enlarged the classification, so my first appearance as a public writer was a success. My dear friend Tom Miller, one of the inner circle, lived near Colonel Anderson and introduced me to him. And in this way, the windows were open and the walls of my dungeon through which the light of knowledge streamed in. Every day's toil, even the long hours of night service, were lightened by books which I carried about with me and read at intervals that could be snatched from duty. And the future was made bright by the thought when Saturday came, a new volume could be obtained. In this way, I became familiar with Macaulay's essays and his history, with Bancroft's History of the United States, which I studied with more care than any other book that I had read. Lamb's essays were my special delight, but I had at this time no knowledge of the great master of all, Shakespeare, beyond the selected pieces that we had in school books. My taste for him I acquired a little later at the old Pittsburgh Theater. John Phipps, James R. Wilson, Thomas N. Miller, William Cowley, members of our circle, shared with me the invaluable privilege of Colonel Anderson's library. Books which would have been impossible for me to obtain elsewhere were, by his wise generosity, placed within my reach. And I owe him a taste for literature which I would not exchange for all the millions that were ever amassed by man. Life would be quite intolerable without it. Nothing contributed so much to my companions and myself to clear of low fellowship and bad habits as the benefice of the good colonel. Later, when fortune smiled upon me, one of my first duties was to erect a monument to him, my benefactor. It stands in front of the hall and library in Diamond Square, which I presented to Allegheny, and bears this inscription: To Colonel James Anderson, founder of Free Libraries in Western Pennsylvania. He opened his library to working boys and upon Saturday afternoons acted as librarian, thus dedicating not only his books, but himself to the noble work. This monument is erected in grateful remembrance by Andrew Carnegie, one of the working boys to whom thus were opened the precious treasures of knowledge and imagination through which youth must ascend. This is but a tribute and only gives a faint idea of the depth of my gratitude which I feel what she did for me and my companions. It was from my own early experience that I decided that there was no use to which money could be applied so productive of good to boys and girls who have good within them and the ability and ambition to develop it as the founding of a public library in a community which was willing to support it as a municipal institution. I am sure that the future of those libraries that I have been privileged to found will prove the correctness of this opinion. For if one boy in each library district, by having access to one of these libraries, is half as much benefited as I was by having access to Colonel Anderson's 400 well-worn volumes, I shall consider that they had not been established in vain.